to the questions. Can I ask Councillor Boswell?
Question number 1 to the Cabinet Member.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thank the councillor for the question. I mean, the answer is very explicit, really. I don't know whether Councillor Boswell has actually ventured as far as Battersea Park and seen the wonderful adventure playground and how packed it is at the weekends. But any members that haven't seen the refurbishment and how well it's going should go and do so. The wonderful addition of an extra attraction to Battersea Park, as anybody who's been following Mumsnet and some of the other family websites will know, is really very welcome in the borough and is going to be appreciated by an awful lot of our families.
Supplementary, Madam Mayor. Supplementary.
Yep, absolutely.
Supplementary.
No,
Thank you very much for your answer. Nothing in this answer addresses still the complete lack of understanding of what that adventure playground meant to people locally and the local residents in Battersea. And this adds insult to injury, having this Go Ape facility, which for anyone that doesn't know in this chamber is going to charge £24 a head for children. And if you're talking about social media sites, I don't know which ones Councillor Tracy's looking at, but I know on Street Life, local people are extremely, extremely angry and upset about this. My question is, you talk in your answer, we anticipate there will be a number of discretionary concessions at the new Go Ape site. Can you confirm that at least at a minimum that will be so for schools?
Actually, it might not necessarily be via the schools. That's not necessarily the best place of awarding some sort of concession. And we are still in discussions as to how best to give it. I mean, my own belief is that it shouldn't just be as of right or means tests or anything like that, but it perhaps should be a reward for some of our youngsters and some of our youngsters who perhaps volunteer or do other things within the community or achieve something within the community. But there will be considerable concessions that Go Ape are offering us, which we will use sensitively. And I will, when we have some more suggestions, obviously take something to committee. But the councillor forgets completely what Battersea Park was and what it is there and who it is there to service. It was, of course, a London park and is still considerably inhabited by Londoners. It's not a local Battersea Park as such. I know a lot of people, even the Prince of Wales Drive lot, think it's their back garden, but it isn't. It is a very well-used London facility, and in the dying days of the GLC, it may have become a very dilapidated and underused park, but under our stewardship, it has, in fact, it probably sees the greatest numbers of any park of its kind in London, with the exception of perhaps Hyde Park, that does more concessions than we do at Battersea. But it is an incredibly well-used park, and I'm very, very proud of it.
Councillor Nadler.
Second supplementary. Yes, I think the Cabinet Member may agree with me, therefore, that far from being a break with tradition, these recent additions to Battersea Park are another positive example of the tradition of good stewardship established under Conservative administrations in Wandsworth. And this has seen Battersea Park revive and flourish over the last 35 years, so that it now offers an unrivalled array of free services alongside innovative complementary offers such as the boating lake and the zoo and cycle hire, and now, of course, the treetop walk. So I think these things have to be seen as a whole.
Thank you. I'd of course agree with that, and I'd add the Pump House and the Art Gallery, which I think is on the calendar of very many people interested in art. It is a wonderful park, and to try and actually suggest at this stage, the opposition to suggest that we didn't deliver our promise of providing a very adventurous and very good park for the local youngsters at the same time as trying to bring in something particularly special. They can try as hard as they like, but the local residents know exactly what we've delivered, and they are using it and showing and proving to us that we were right.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Clay. Thank you.
I thank Councillor Clay for the question. I'm very pleased to report that once again we are the safest in a London borough, and by some distance when one compares ourselves with our geographical neighbours. It's a remarkable achievement because we do run a very tight ship, as ever, in Wandsworth. This answer lists here the many indicators. Of course, there are a couple of dozen key crime indicators. Most of them are heading strongly in the right direction. It's extremely good news. There are some, as one might expect, where things are still challenging, and that's where our focus is. I think it's worth making the point that this is a real quality of life issue. We were just accused of not being in touch, but I think this is one of those things where we really are absolutely in touch, and recent surveys absolutely show that people feel safer than they have done in the past. So we are definitely getting things right. As for the role of councillors, absolutely critical, completely critical. In terms of being in touch with the local community, with residents, and holding all the various agencies to account, including myself, I might add.
Supplementary, Madam Mayor. Thank you. Given Councillor Cooper, I'm pleased that the councillor's role in holding the police to account is recognised as key. Given Councillor Cooper's opposition to a politician chairing the new Safer Neighbourhood Board, does the Cabinet member think that she should practice what she preaches, and I must say it pains me to suggest this, and urge Councillor Thomas to stand down as chairman of the Fursdown Safer Neighbourhood panel, even though most people would regard him as doing a sterling job?
I thank Councillor Clay for the question. It is a very interesting one, isn't it? I think it has been commented on that Councillor Cooper hasn't attended as many police consultative committee meetings as she might have done. But I notice we will come to the next question. Deals perhaps with that subject.
Of course, the Cabinet member will be aware that the rolling 12 months to the end of December includes 9 months under the previous model and only 3 months under the total policing model. So would he be surprised to hear that one of the concerns that was expressed at last night's Fursdown Safer Neighbourhood panel meeting is the lack of bobbies on the beat seen in Fursdown, and that is a cry that's now appearing across the whole of the borough. Concerns are rising and people are nervous, and although you say you're not out of touch, a number of people locally are saying that you are. Does that surprise you, and do you think that the total policing model is delivering for local people on the ground?
Well, I thank the councillor for the question. She really ought to pay more attention. It's not the total policing model, it's the local policing model, and it's been in place since mid-September, which is long enough to get a grip on its name. I do not accept for a moment that it's not working. Indeed, the figures, and we are only 4 months into it, the figures are extremely encouraging. A 12% reduction in crime. That's the best performance for 5 years. It's extremely good news. And the party opposite really ought to think about its role, because there have been quite a few leaflets lately spreading how shall we put it? Yes, fear, thank you. Misinformation, selective statistics, which are deeply misleading, and it is very, very irresponsible. I cite one example that's appeared in Battersea lately, citing a 22% cut. I don't doubt you've, police officers, I don't doubt you've got some spurious basis which you could defend it on, but the reality of police on the ground, boots on the ground, that people see is that we have got more constables than we've had for a very long time, and that there is more resource in neighbourhood policing than there has been for years. And that's extremely good news, and you ought to reflect that to reassure people.
Question 14 for the Cabinet member for Crime and Safety.
Well, I do thank the councillor for this question. Isn't it puzzling? It really is deeply puzzling, this question. I think it's a bit of an insight into the psyche of the Labour Party, that Councillor Cooper seems to think that it just sort of somehow follows that a politician is going to have a problem being credible, independent, or capable of listening. Now, that may be how you see the world, but it's not how we see it. We think we're perfectly capable of doing all of those things. For me, this is about showing leadership, being accountable, and taking responsibility for things, which we know the party opposite, and I've just cited the misinformation, we know that you are not good for taking responsibility for things, whether it's the big picture of the wreckage you cause of the country's economy, which nobody's ever taken responsibility for. Yes, yes. Who was regulating those banks? You were in charge. You were in charge.
Gordon Brown giving them 9%.
Yeah. Thank you. Didn't he? I believe he opened Lehman Brothers. Remember them? Lehman Brothers headquarters in London. But there we are. Anyway, we're straying off the subject here. The important point here is taking responsibility. And clearly the party opposite, maybe it's just because you haven't been in power for 3.5 decades here, you just don't seem to be able to appreciate that that's what being a local politician is about. And the accountability bit seems to me to be absolutely central. There was a fascinating moment in the last OSC where Councillor Cooper proposed an amendment that the politician should be replaced by representatives of the community. Well, for me, that is the very definition of a politician, and is a fundamental confusion on Councillor Cooper's part. So I find the question baffling, and I reject its premise completely.
Councillor Cooper.
And can I just start with a point of personal explanation, because there's a number of comments that both Councillor Clay and Councillor Cook have made about my view about this, and it's quite clear that you know nothing at all about it, or clearly you're excising the history of how police consultative committees came to be set up in the first place, and the reason why people from the community are not politicians from the community. Obviously politicians come from their local communities. We can't be elected here unless we either live or are registered to vote or run businesses here. So clearly we are all local people. But there were reasons why they were not politicians. And moving now to the question, you say in your answer that you're prepared to listen. But of course, one of the points that has been made by the current chair of our own police consultative committee. So your track record is very poor on listening. It's not so much me that's saying that it should not be chaired by a politician. It is locally our own chair of our police consultative committee who has expressed a clear preference on behalf of the committee for an independent chair. So I ask you again, will you reconsider this in the light of history and in the light of the request from the police consultative committee?
Well, I thank Councillor Cooper for that additional question. I'm very well aware of the origin of the previous structures. They followed the 1982 Scarman report. In fact, just this weekend I was staying in the Scarman Hall at Warwick University and was reading exactly about that. So nobody takes these changes on lightly. They've been considered at very great length, but I think it's just slightly sort of missed the point to tie it back. There's an awful lot that's changed over that time. As for the listening and the comments from the current chair, Charles Jones, I would just like to sort of pause at that point and just pay tribute to his work over the years and everyone on the current committee. They've done a very good job, and I think we should all thank them for it. I've met with them. We've had plenty of opportunity to talk about things. They've made a number of suggestions which have been taken on board about representation from the criminal justice system, mental health, and youth dimensions which could be better represented. They've all been incorporated, but I don't agree with everything that he said, and so there are some differences. But I have listened. I think there's plenty of evidence for that.
A second supplementary. Is the Cabinet member as astonished as I am that Councillor Cooper is citing discussions that have taken place in the WPCC, which is the Wandsworth Police Consultative Committee, when to my almost certain knowledge she has not been there for the last 2 years?
I thank Councillor Clay. Well, yes. I mean, the whole question is the whole question is astonishing on many levels. That being one of them. The other is that I'm sure Charles Jones can speak for himself, and that Councillor Cooper ought to just sort of stand up for her own opinions and not cite somebody else's. I've spoken with Mr. Jones, and we've had a very good exchange. Yes, I find the whole approach of the opposition on this question really rather baffling. But there we are. It's not for the first time, is it?
Question 15.
Mr. Mayor, surely we should allow Councillor Cooper a point of personal explanation on this one.
Yeah, point of personal explanation, if you like. I'm sure I have attended the meeting in the last 2 years, but I'm very sorry that Councillor Clay, rather like Councillor McDermott, appears to have so little going on in her life, so few things to do in her own ward that she represents, that she has all this time to sit down and do nothing but go through the minutes of meetings and check the attendance lists. Shame on you, Councillor Clay, for not spending your time on this council more effectively out in the community.
Councillor Clay.
I think earlier, point of personal explanation, we were talking earlier on about politicians and what local councils are supposed to do. And as the chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee that's in charge of community safety, I think I'm expected to take note of minutes and who attends meetings and what they say.
In that case, Madam Mayor, I would hope that she would be able to correctly state when I have attended, and I have been in the last 2 years. It's sad that you're still inaccurate.
Question 15. Question. Well, actually, could I suggest that that be discussed out of this meeting? Question 15, please.
Question 15 to the Cabinet Member.
I'd like to thank the Councillor for his question. Just add, the answer is written in the agenda, but I would just like to add that, of course, I'm fully aware the Council does not work in a vacuum on this and should also pay tribute to the partners who work with the Council, South Thames College, Job Centre Plus, for example, the employers who've taken advantage of the development opportunities within the borough to create those jobs, and, of course, the job seekers themselves for successfully getting back into work.
Thank you, Councillor Harris.
And could the Cabinet Member just reassure me that, particularly in the light of the enormous amount of development that is going on in the borough at the moment, welcome development, that we're doing as much as we have. We've heard already about things like the work match scheme and things like that. We will continue to be as innovative as we can in making sure that those opportunities are there for our residents in the borough.
I'm quite happy to give that assurance. As he mentioned in his supplementary, as the leader mentioned earlier, we have recently set up the Work Match office in Lavender Hill in my ward, which is incredibly successfully referring clients to potential jobs. Myself had a resident come to me recently, and I think within a day or so had already had their first interviews and was finding work. And that's a story that's repeated again and again, and I'd urge all members who have any residents who are looking for work to refer to them. But I would say we're not just resting on our laurels, and we're not just resting on Work Match. The leader hosted a employment summit recently, looking at working better with major employers, with educators within the borough to make sure that everyone takes advantage of those opportunities. And I'm hopeful that within the next few cycles we'll be bringing forward some more plans as well to ensure that people, particularly in the east of the borough, are taking as much advantage as possible of the developments there.
Right, second supplementary, Councillor Thomas.
Obviously, welcome any reduction in the number of people on JSA in the borough, but does the Cabinet Member have any idea how many of these reductions are actually due to residents in the borough moving from a situation of unemployment into work, and then conversely, how many are actually down to people on JSA being forced out of the borough because of the impact of the welfare reform changes that have been introduced?
Councillor Cousin.
Well, I can assure him that it's because people are finding work. The very simple answer is these are statistics provided by the ONS and NOMUS. It's an excellent website if you like your statistics. I'd recommend you go and have a look. To take, for example, the job seekers allowance, the overall rate, which is a proportion of the population, has dropped. In the answer it's cited there, but it's 2.9% to 2.2%. If it was just people moving out, then obviously that rate would not be changing that way. And for people 18 to 24, because we also monitor that, we can see there that that rate is dropping at an even higher rate within this borough. Between 2010, when Labour bequeathed us 4% youth unemployment, the last Labour government, it's now down to 2.6% within the borough. We've seen something of the order of 550 young people, 18 to 24 in the borough, getting a job, again well below the London and UK averages. They may be seeking, because I'm very aware that the Labour Party need there to be bad news for other people's jobs so they can see some good news for their own jobs. Unfortunately, that bad news isn't here in Wandsworth.
The time for questions has been completed.